Welcome to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're telling the stories of Kansas City nonprofits and the people behind them. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggis. KC Cares is proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. You know, there's a saying that goes, those who do not remember or learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. Our history defines who we are. It tells the stories of what we've done, where we've been, and helps guide us who we will become. And preserving the past and bringing its relevance to today is one of many things that the Jackson County Historical Society does. And we're welcoming today Brian Burns, who is the president of the Jackson County Historical Society. Brian, welcome to KC Cares.
Hi, Ruth, and thanks very much for your interest in the society.
All right, so we were talking a little bit about, those younger folks who always say, history. Why is this important? What's its relevance? Let's chat a little bit about that and what the Historical Society does about that.
Well, one place that we can start is our area of emphasis. Let me back up real quick. We go all the way back to 1909. We can trace our beginnings when a number of historians and folks historically inclined began to gathered one day on the front yard of the Warnell House. But we normally trace the history of the modern organization back to 1958, which is when we incorporated as a nonprofit. Now, here's one way people responded to history in real time and in real life events. In 1958, word got around that the 1859 jail, the historic structure just off Independence Square in Independence, had been scheduled for demolition. Well, a number of folks didn't like that idea and organized to begin to raise money to hopefully acquire that building. The first $1,000 for that effort came from Joyce Hall of Hallmark Cards during a phone conversation with former President Harry Truman. And so the organization incorporated, raised the money, they acquired the building and opened it to the public in 1859. They listed it, it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1970. And over the years, the Historical Society has operated it, opened it to the public and offered tours to folks from all over, as well as young people, school children, who are endlessly fascinated once they get inside that building. Maybe they maybe groan a little bit out loud when they hear about the field trip, but it's fair to say that once they get inside the building and are allowed to briefly enter and be incarcerated in one of the iron gated cell blocks, they are very interested. And so this is a great example of how history can come alive in a very vivid and exciting way. And that's why we care so much about, that's one reason we care about the 1859 jail, the building so much. You could call it perhaps the Historical Society's heirloom asset, along with the archives that it keeps in the historic Truman Courthouse, just a few doors away on Independence Square.
I want to dig in a little bit about what the Historical Society is. Who is it? And kind of its structure. Are you tied to the county government? Are you freestanding? Share with us a little bit of what you are.
Okay, well, no, we do get some support from the county, for which, of course, we're very grateful. And we are located in the historic Truman Courthouse, and we maintain our archives and materials that are of interest to folks from all over the county. We also schedule and program various events, and unfortunately, like so many nonprofits, Ruth, we had a full schedule of events and programs scheduled for last year that we had to cancel. We also had to cancel, unfortunately, our very popular and successful ghost tours of the 1859 jail that have routinely sold out every October. But of course, we really had no realistic option to avoid closing the building. So we are supported by the county. But we like to think that we serve the county government, but anybody interested in history. And we do have several exciting new initiatives coming up for 2021, a couple of which I can speak to about right now. For instance, we are very excited about what we're calling our digital database now. Through the generosity of our donors and through the fundraising coordination of our former president, Gloria Smith, we were able to contract with an outfit called History IT, which is a digital imaging company. And they've been helping us put together a searchable online database through which visitors, once this is launched, visitors will be able to browse the thousands and thousands of archival photographs on file in the Jackson County Historical Society archives. For example, we have a number of images from what's called the Strauss Peyton Collection, which is a name that I'll bet a lot of your listeners will recognize. And that's the Kansas City photo studio, which for the bulk of the 20th century made beautiful portraits of individuals and families from across Kansas City, as well as very interesting visitors to Kansas City in the early 20th century. And a number of these images will be, you will be able to retrieve them and look at them once this digital database is launched, hopefully later this spring. And once we get that up and going, we'll certainly make an announcement to that effect. So that's one thing that we're doing. I'd also like to mention what we call our e-journal. Now, for many years, the Jackson County Historical Society has published what's called the Jackson County Historical Society Journal, which is a publication full of interesting stories and photographs, of course, pertaining to Jackson County. But last year, we made the decision to go online with that and establish what we call our e-journal, which allows us to post articles, interesting articles about Jackson County, but on a much more timely basis. So anybody who wants to go to our website at jchs.org will be able to browse through our first 5 or 6 articles that we have posted there on the e-journal. The way it works is that we'll be done with an article, and then that article will arrive in the inboxes of our various subscribers and members, and then after a certain period of time, it will be posted for the public. And these stories are very interesting, and I think this is a proper place for me to mention too, how the Jackson County Historical Society, I think, is doing its best to expand its focus a little bit. I was a reporter for many years for the KC Star, and I can remember covering the Jackson County Historical Society going back to the 80s. And when I think about what kind of organization it was then, I think it's fair to say that its emphasis was Eastern Jackson County, independence, especially, the 19th century independence and the role that community played in the opening of the West, Overland Trails, the Civil War, Joseph Smith, and the Mormon community, and of course, Harry Truman. Harry Truman especially was of interest to everybody. In fact, the author, David McCullough, always enjoys telling the story about, during the approximately 10 years that he was coming from his home and I think Massachusetts to research his biography of President Truman, which was published in 1992. He came to he worked at the Truman Library, but also spent a lot of time in the Jackson County Historical Society archives. The story that he also liked to tell was how he would get in the car with Sue Gentry, the longtime journalist with the Independence Examiner and one of the society's former presidents. He would get in the car with Sue, and Sue would have him drive around Independence, and she would point out the various houses and the families who lived in those houses and what relationship they might have had to the Truman family. And so David McCullough always enjoyed talking about how the important work that was being done by the Historical Society back when he was visiting us. But also, those Harry Truman, Mr. Truman, the Overland Trails, the 19th century community of independence, all of those topics, they were fascinating then and remain so today. But we've also made the effort, I think in recent years, to do our best to explore the histories of other communities in Jackson County. Last year, the Society's Board of Directors approved what we call a call to action, in which we would do our best to research and share histories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, those communities in Jackson County, and to do our best to document their experiences in Jackson County. And so if anyone who visits our e-journal at jchs.org and goes through the available articles, I think it's fair to say that you'll be able to find some articles that speak to that. There's an article about the various visits that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. made to the Kansas City area. There's an article about the Negro Leagues and the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. There are 2 articles about Charlie Parker, the celebrated jazz musician. And excuse me, I also mentioned, we can mention too, that the Historical Society for the past couple of years has partnered with the Mutual Musicians Foundation in the 18th and Vine District to celebrate the August birthday of Charlie Parker. So these are examples of how we're doing our best to expand our focus and speak to all of the people and all of their experiences, in Jackson County.
Is the Historical Society all lay-led? Do you have paid staff? I mean, you've got so much in your assets.
Right, yes. We right now we need to we have in fact a board meeting coming up, and that's one of our chief topics. We need to make sure that we are ready to reopen. We're kind of down a few people in our staff right now, but yes, it's a full-time job to be proper stewards of all of the archival material that we have, as well as to operate the 1859 jail. And so during normal times, we do have staff members, paid staff, but we also benefit from a very loyal contingent of volunteers. The Society for many years has benefited from folks who have volunteered both at the 1859 jail, helping to give the tours over in that building, as well as the archives itself, helping us to properly process all of the archival materials that we do have. So it's a combination, a few members of paid staff, but just a very passionate membership, as well as very passionate volunteers to help us be proper stewards of all of the materials we have.
How does one become a member?
That's easy. You can go to jchs.org, and there's a portal there that will give you all of the information as to how to join, as well as how to volunteer.
How important is membership to an organization like yours?
It could not be more important. We're fortunate in that we've had for many years a very loyal core of members who, of course, pay a modest fee to be members of the organization and to volunteer at our many events and programs. But we're always looking for more. We know that they're out there, and we know that they need to hear more from us. And that's one of the things that we're doing with the e-journal. We're being a lot more active online, posting occasional historic photographs on Twitter and other social media. And so we're doing our best to engage in maybe not a different demographic, but folks who may not have heard of us before. I think it's fair to say that we're kind of a brand name among organizations like ours in Western Missouri and across Kansas City, but maybe only a certain kind of folks will be aware of it. But we need to be a little bit more out in the community. And we had begun to do that with a lot of fun events on Independence Square and down in the West Bottoms, all of which, of course, we had to postpone and cancel. But hopefully all of that will be getting back going soon. And those ghost tours that I mentioned, that's a great example. Talk about a fun night out with a bunch of fun people. That is a fun night in the 1859 jail. And so hopefully we will be able to reschedule those as soon as we get up and fully running, as we hope to very soon.
We're talking with Brian Burns. He's president of the Jackson County Historical Society. We'll take a quick break. We're going to come back and find out how they get all that good stuff in their archives. We're back talking with Brian Burns. He's president of the Jackson County Historical Society. Brian, we were talking a little earlier in the program about some of the things you have in the archives. How do you get what's in the archives, and whose responsibility is that to get it?
Well, this is where our membership comes in, and our long record of service in the community. As I said, we've been an active organization going back to the late 1950s, and and we have been active in the organization, and we know that we're kind of like a go-to source for folks who have items of what they consider historical interest, and we are there to consider that. I want to be careful in my language here because I'm not a trained museum official, and I know that we want to be proper stewards of the materials that people offer us. And I know that other establishments, other museums across the Kansas City area, do likewise. But we are always open and interested in hearing about whatever historical material that our residents of Jackson County might or might not have. And they can certainly go to our website at jchs.org and just shoot us an email as to what might they have. We just want to make sure that we can take care of it and give it the appropriate attention that it deserves.
Are you looking only for photographs? Or are you looking for actual tangible things that folks might have?
Well, no, all kinds of things. Certainly photographs, but certainly historical documents, three-dimensional objects of all kinds. Now we have a number of variant. I'm not going to mention them because I'm sure as soon as I start mentioning one or two fascinating things that we do have, I'll forget 10 or 20 others that I should have mentioned. But no, not just photographs, any number of fascinating documents having to do with this is history of the county and the communities and the families who live there.
I'm assuming that the jail is closed, that the museum part and everything is with the pandemic is currently not open.
That's correct. It's been closed since basically last fall, which was of course very upsetting, but that was obviously the responsible choice. But certainly once we start to reopen, and I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, we've been in touch with the City of Independence as to their reopening strategy for tourism this spring and summer. They've been in touch with the similar historic groups and societies that operate other historic structures in Independence, like the Bale Mansion and the Bingham Wagner Home. And we have been talking with the National Park Service, which operates the Truman Historic Home at 219 North Delaware. The ticket office for the Truman Home Tours is just adjacent to the 1859 jail. And so we'll be in touch with them as to what their strategy is to reopen. And as soon as we get the idea as to when might be a good time to reopen and when we can fully staff it with staff members and volunteers, we will definitely reopen the 1859 jail to tours, hopefully when the warm weather is here to stay.
That's great. And the best place to find that information would be on your website?
Absolutely, jchs.org. And when we get to that place where we're ready to make announcements regarding the reopening of the 1859 jail, the launch of the digital database, or any other newsworthy announcements, we will post it there. Yes.
Well, let us know, because we certainly want to share it with our audience. You are also in a restoration phase with the Marshall Home Jail. Is that
Yes.
what's going on
Thank you for
there?
asking. Yes, thank you for asking. That's, since we do consider it our kind of our heirloom asset, we want to be appropriate stewards of that historic structure. A few years ago, through the generosity of the Sunderland Foundation of Kansas City, which gifted the society with a $75,000 grant, we were able to contract with Strata Architectural and Preservation firm in Kansas City, which conducted a survey of the historic structure and gave us a list of all of the various issues that need to be addressed in the building. As of late 2019, we were able to restore all of the westward facing windows in the jail, as well as replacing all of the floor joist in the marshal's office. All very important work, but it's also fair to say that there's a number of issues that need to be addressed. And so we do continue to raise money for the continuing preservation of the 1859 jail. And anyone interested in helping us with that effort can also go to our website and find out how to do that there. Thank you for asking.
Let's circle back to the quote that I used at the beginning of our conversation. If we don't remember the things in the past, we're gonna repeat those, maybe the good things, but also the mistakes. You've been involved in history, reporting on history. Give us your take on that. Why would it be important for people to dive in to some of the history that has taken place in Jackson County?
Okay, well, I think, let me name what I think is a really great example of that. As one of our e-journal stories, our editor, Brad Pace, was able to find an article that was published in 1968 in the Missouri Historical Review, and we got permission to repost or post that article. What's that article about? It's all about the 1918 flu epidemic in Kansas City. So what is everybody talking about right now? What were you and I talking about before we went on the air here? It's about the pandemic and when can we access a vaccine, and when can we get back to normal, and how do we handle all of our frustration right now after like being basically literally a year locked away in our homes and not being able to go back to our normal lives. We have missed so much. Well, if you go to that article that we've reposted at jchs.org, you can see vivid evidence of just how our colleagues in 1918 felt exactly the same way. They were exasperated. They were angry. It was often turned into a political issue among opposing factions of the city government here in Kansas City. There was a lot of anger circling around, and it found a lot of places to land. It landed on elected officials in Kansas City. It landed on health officials in Kansas City and Jackson County. It's basically the exact same experience we're going through today, only with people wearing very uncomfortable looking clothing. That's the only difference. And so what can you take from that? Well, maybe we're not the first people in Kansas City to be exasperated by a long, lingering, and very frustrating public health issue. And I'm sorry to say that one of the messages when you read that article is the same message that I get when I try to register for a vaccine. And that's the message of your patience is key. Well, thank you. I'm aware of that. And I guess it helps a little bit that people were urged to be patient back in 1918. Not that it helps all that much. So we've kind of been here before, and I guess that's kind of good to know. So that's one example of just how relevant historical information can be to what everybody is thinking about this morning or this afternoon or last week.
Ryan, we appreciate your taking time to share with us this great asset in our community, the Jackson County Historical Society. I can't wait till your digital platform is up. If folks want to go to your website now, there's really so much there and
Yes.
very robust. So I can't wait till there's even more. And how relevant with, you're talking about indigenous and people of color, and that there is a history that we can learn and grow from. Quickly tell us how and why did you get involved in this?
Well, as I said, I was fascinated. I was always interested in the organization. Covered it as a reporter for the Star. And then a few years ago, a longtime member of the Historical Society, a longtime board member, Brent Schandemeyer, has a long history of being active in many Independence area nonprofit and historical organizations and efforts, contacted me and asked if I would be a board member, and I was very honored and agreed to do it. So I've been involved in a for a few years now. But like any, it wasn't just because I knew Brent. Anybody is available. Anybody who expresses an interest in the society, we'd love to hear from them.
What have you learned in this crazy year, 18 months, that you will take with you to move the organization forward?
Well, that's really an interesting. That's really an interesting question. I think we're going to do our best, me and my fellow members of the organization going forward. We really need to remember that people enjoyed coming together and over discussing historical topics or meeting in a historical context. It was so interesting and exciting to meet people, like-minded people who shared an interest and passion in everything that has happened in Jackson County, and how not only everything that has happened, stuff that you may be familiar with, stuff that you may have had no idea that had happened, but like we can talk about it now and talk about how it might or might not be meaningful to our lives today. And so I think that's our challenge going forward, me and my fellow board members, as we go forward and doing our best to re-engage folks across Jackson County, across the whole county, to talk about history in a way that makes it relevant to their lives. Why is it interesting to them? And frankly, I think you might agree, Ruth, that everybody is ready to re-engage. Everybody is ready to get together again. We have to be careful not to re-engage too soon or too casually. But we know that day is coming. And so we want to be there when that day comes and ready to talk about whatever might interest them as to the past of Jackson County and how it remains relevant. It can be relevant to us today.
Well, in the meantime, we encourage our audience to go to your website for the Jackson County Historical Society. It's jchs.org.
Yes.
And engage in many ways, learn a little bit, contribute, be part of learning from history and spreading it. Brian, thank you so much for being with us. And we want to thank you for listening and watching KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications, and we are proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. If you'd like to be a guest on KC Cares or for underwriting opportunities, please visit our website, kccaresonline.org. And you can spread the love and find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. And catch us on ESPN 1510 AM, 94.5 FM, Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Thank you for tuning in to KC Cares.